Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be recapping the news around Osama Bin Laden's death. We'll also be discussing the NATO-led airstrike in Libya, and we'll be discussing medical marijuana raids still happening here in the U.S. at the behest of the federal government, even though they weren't supposed to happen anymore. That coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
You have tuned in to episode 203 of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
We do have a lot to get into, going to be continue to talk about Libya and some of the stuff that's going on there, you know, that third war that we're involved in, as well as, of course, the news about Bin Laden. We can't miss talking about that because, whew, I got a lot to say about it.
And we're only halfway through the week, but apparently the news cycle hasn't dropped it yet either, at the time of the filming anyway.
So we could not ignore this issue. We've got to talk about that. And I also want to talk about one issue that is very near and dear to my heart, about sick and ill, dying people being able to get the medicine they deserve. The Obama administration supposedly was going to allow sick people to get that medicine and respect states that pass medical marijuana laws. Well, apparently he just said he's going to stop the raids, and even some of those are continuing, but he's doing something else that's much, much more insidious, that's going to have a much, much greater effect on states that are thinking about passing medical marijuana laws, or even causing some states to rethink the ones they passed, because, well, what he's doing is much, much worse than the Bush administration ever did. We'll be getting into that, but first, how can we ignore it, Nick? I mean, it happened almost a week ago as of the time that this show is going to premiere out on TV stations all over the place. But, I mean, it's still very important. You've still got people
well, we can't just not
reveling in the joy and the glory of our freedom. And
right.
How killing one man and spending trillions
Freedom
of dollars.
made a touchdown, I guess. And,
yeah.
you know, I'll preface this by saying, I'm glad Osama Bin Laden is dead. He had it coming. He was, you know, a mass murderer, but
not a very nice
I
man.
didn't really, to be perfectly blunt, I wasn't feeling in the touchdown spirit. When I heard the news, it was a piece of news. I took it at face value and said, well, yeah, it's been 10 years. I'm glad they got him.
It's about time.
Yeah, I understand the human need for closure, and to some extent, even though it's not one of our better traits, the need for vengeance. If you feel like you've been slighted, if you feel like you've been violated, typically, whether you're justified in wanting it or not, it's a natural human emotion to want vengeance against someone who's done something bad against you.
Which is why I almost had an initial reaction that was somewhat opposite of yours. Now, I know this is going to make, I'm probably going to get on the terrorist watch list for saying this if I'm not already there, but I was a little bit nervous, a little bit apprehensive when I heard the news that he died because of that exact thing, vengeance. Now, what does that mean? What's it mean? This is one guy who got killed. What's it going to mean for us? Does it mean that we get all our freedoms and liberties back? No, that's not going to happen. You know what it does mean? It means that there are other people who now want vengeance. And they've been saying it, the other terrorists out there, they want vengeance as well. And what's that going to mean for them, their vengeance? Well, it's going to mean eventually another terrorist attack. That's the logical answer, right? I mean, even the experts say so. Homeland Security, this is what they say. It's going to mean another terrorist attack, which will mean another war, which will mean even more debt, more bankruptcy, which will mean Osama Bin Laden, he got exactly what he wanted. It couldn't have gone more perfectly. I mean, essentially bankrupting the United States. I mean, and it doesn't necessarily go down that way, but that's what I thought of. Oh, man, they're going to want to get vengeance. That means another terrorist attack. That means crackdown on liberties. That means another war. That means more debt, more inflation, bankruptcy. Wow, this really could ruin us.
Those are our real concerns. I think, unfortunately, most people are blind to that, what I think is
well, I watched the videos in Washington, D.C. and, whoa, yeah, we did it.
But what did we win? I still haven't found the prize at the bottom of my box of Cracker Jack. I'm sorry.
Are we going to get rid of the scanners at airports?
Nobody rose from the dead. The victims of the terrorist attacks on September 11th didn't come back.
What about those 5,000 dead soldiers?
Yeah, I think it's over 5,000 soldiers that the U.S. has lost in Iraq and Afghanistan. All of the civilians that have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Hundreds of thousands, if not a million of them.
All of the new terrorists that were created by that policy.
Thousands and thousands ready to come attack us.
And you have to remember that, as you're pointing out, Toby, with if there is another terrorist attack, I am really scared of that possibility because I think we will see a greater crackdown on American civil liberties, and I don't think the American people will push. I don't have a whole lot of faith left in the American people as a whole.
Well, you saw their reaction to this,
right? Oh, well, we won. What did we win?
Are we pulling out of the wars we're in?
We're not more prosperous. The wars aren't anywhere near an end. And even if you're a big supporter of the war on terror, you should know it's nowhere near over. It's not over. In fact, it's never over because it's not a war against a country. Every time you kill a terrorist, whether it's Osama Bin Laden or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, it doesn't matter. There are 10 more guys ready to take their place. And if the policy, if what the war on terror is that the United States government is going to react to every attack launched by some third world kid with a pipe bomb and a Kalashnikov against the U.S. or U.S. interests, I guess now in Libya we just get involved when it threatens U.S. interests, even when the president says it doesn't affect our security at all. If that's the policy, we're doomed. And I'm increasingly convinced that we are, in fact, doomed because there's just people aren't basing their responses off logic or reason. It's just emotional. Yeah, it's just emotional, and people would seem happy to see the U.S. bankrupt itself because they think it's going to make them more secure.
It's because, Nick, before the show started, we were thinking, well, what part of the brain is this acting in? Those people who are reveling in the celebration and all the people who really think we are more free because of that, which is, in fact, nearly the opposite, if a mute point at all. What part of the brain are they? I mean, it looked like a frat party out in front of the White House.
It really looked like there were 20-year-old kids chugging bottles of liquor. I mean, it was a frat party.
If they weren't just using the drunk part of their brain, they definitely weren't using their frontal lobes. It was more of this emotional lizard, or what you called it, the monkey brain. Because yes, they were still that social. You said, what do
lizards don't socialize?
Lizards. So I called it lizard brain. You're right. It is the monkey brain. Because when monkeys go, whoop, oh yeah, that's what other monkey goes, oh yeah, we did it.
If you felt happy at the news, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but this pompous.
It should make you a little bit nervous, though.
If you are really thinking, if you think about what's going to come out of it.
What are the logical consequences?
I think you're morally.
Not to say that I don't think we should have gotten him. I don't think that the right thing was probably maybe they had to shoot him in the face and kill him immediately. The whole thing seems a little fishy, especially the fact that they dumped him to the fishes 3 hours later. I don't really want to go down the whole conspiracy.
And now they're not releasing the photographs that they said. I mean,
and it was a very convenient time for Obama.
Photographs that would dispel the conspiracy theories. And they addressed the conspiracy theories right up front and said, don't worry, we have proof.
Yeah.
But some people are still going to disbelieve us, and then they say, well, we're not releasing that proof. They say they have DNA. I'm going to just assume it happened. I don't know how significant it is either way. To be perfectly honest.
It was definitely convenient, at the very least.
I mean, that's the thing that gets me, is all this celebrating, it was one guy. Bad guy, sure. Doesn't really make a difference in the war on terror. Doesn't mean you're any safer. I mean, the president's statement, Obama made a statement that the world is a better, safer place without Osama Bin Laden in it.
Did they get his 2 guy and 3 guy and 4 guy and the hundreds and thousands of other guys behind him? I mean, I just don't get it. If you caught the man alive, couldn't you force him to tell you where guy 2 is and guy 3 is and guy 4 is and guy 5 is and guy, and tell the whole it all goes down?
The only other thing that sounds fishy, and if it's not misreporting, then whoever made the decision should have been shot in the face, was the person who decided to, supposedly, the way it was reported by Fox on Monday and the way it was reported by the BBC today, Wednesday before I came in, was that Osama bin Laden's wife was not killed as originally reported, was injured, but was not taken captive. Now, those were the preliminary reports. I'm not sure if that will have been revised. I'm not sure if that's, it just hasn't been clarified. If that's true, I find it a little bit suspect that we will torture the crap out of cab drivers from Pakistan and God knows where for a little bit of information that they may or may not have. We'll detain them for a decade in places like Guantanamo Bay for a little bit of intelligence, but you're not going to detain, I'm not saying torture, but you're not going to detain and interrogate Osama bin Laden's wife? It's a little, either it's a little suspect or it's a whole lot of stupid. I don't know which one it is. Either you're incompetent or you're hiding something. So take your pick.
I guess I'm jaded, and so whenever I hear a government story, it always seems like, oh, well, what are they not telling us? What else is here? That's just me. But let's just say for argument's sake, it's the exact way the government said so. It doesn't mean it's time to celebrate. It means it's time to take stock and say, okay, well, this is what the mission we originally set out to do as the United States, right? Well, let's curtail that mission. How do we make ourselves safer at home? It's not by going out there and picking off every single terrorist, because everyone you kill, you create a couple more. It's kind of like Medusa. You chop off her head and you get it. It's Medusa, well, right? You chop off her head and she grows a couple more. Hydra, whatever.
Medusa had she turned you to stone.
Oh, she turned you to stone, right.
She had
the Hydra.
snakes for a hair, which
and
is very
she turned
close.
You to stone. Okay, it's the Hydra where you chop off its head, you grow a couple more. That's what happens when you kill terrorists, when you go over to foreign lands and you kill these dragons. They grow lots more heads.
Well, remember, you don't just kill the terrorists. In this case, supposedly there was no collateral damage, but we have to remember, since September 11th, military action undertaken by the United States, and none of it was done directly or intentionally, but military action undertaken by the United States killed, according to what estimates you believe, on the conservative side, 100,000 people in Iraq. On,
if you count people who starved to death or didn't have water or lived in sanitary.
It depends on how far away you take it from how direct you're talking. Amnesty International reported on a 600,000 figure. That might have been pretty broad in what was included. But certainly there was a lot of collateral damage. A lot of civilians died who had families, who had kids, or who had parents when children were killed. Those people tend to harbor some bitterness. Not all of them. A very small fraction of them become terrorists. Surprisingly, you would think that more people losing family members would become terrorists.
Yeah, I got to say, you got to give them some credit. If that happened here and it was the Chinese over here hunting down some guy, some American terrorist who had blown up one of their buildings or something, and it just so happened that they had killed my family as well as nearly 500,000 of my countrymen, or 1 million, or 100,000 even, or even 1,000. I mean, if that happened to my family, I don't think that I would be all that happy with the Chinese. I'd probably become an insurgent. I mean, it's amazing that fewer haven't become. And so that's why I'm saying it's time to take stock and say, well, why do they say they're so mad at us in the first place? Is it really because of Britney Spears? Well, that was the argument back in the Bush era when she was popular, and Coke and Pepsi and our heathenist way of life. No, it's because we're occupying the Middle East and the world. We've said over 700,000 military bases. I was recently listening to
700.
I'm sorry, 7,000.
That would be impressive.
700 military bases around the world. I recently heard on Free Talk Live they were quoted as saying there's over 1,000 now, because that was an old number, like from 5 years ago. So we've occupied many more bases since the numbers we've been giving us around 700. So I mean, that's what we need to do if we really want to stop terrorism, is bring those people home.
Remember that it's not only the people who have family members who are killed that become an issue. You have to remember that Osama Bin Laden himself got his start on the U.S. government's payroll.
Oh yeah, he was a CIA operative.
Right. That's where he got his training.
Yeah, I mean, he was working directly for the federal government using it depends how old you are. Not my tax dollars. I think I was before my age when I was paying into the system, but definitely my parents' tax dollars. They paid part of Osama bin Laden's paycheck. That helped him get all the means to come over here and do what he did here. I mean, it's just insane to me. And what's more insane than all of that, though, is the reaction of the American people and the amount of people who are out there on their couches or in their living rooms or thinking about clicking away on their computer, who just are very mad at us because they think that we are the worst people in the world for even mentioning the subject.
Well, heaven forbid. Heaven forbid we say we shouldn't train terrorists, maybe because then sometimes they come back and attack us. I mean,
meddle in other cultures.
We did. The United States successfully got a bunch of insurgents and religious fanatics, and just people, whether you want to call them terrorists or insurgents or any of those things. They got a bunch of guys with guns. They gave them some training. They gave them some money. They gave them some Stinger missiles, and those insurgents, those ragtag people in Afghanistan, in part, and they did a great part in bringing down the Soviet Union. They brought down the evil empire, something that people never thought would collapse, people at the time.
Now, did they do it by blowing up every building?
Huh?
Did they do it by blowing up every building, Nick?
All they had to do was keep the Soviets engaged in a war that they could not win and bleed them. And that's what they did to the Soviets,
got
and
mighty
that's
pricey.
what they're doing to us.
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight. All it will take, even though it looks like, oh, well, they've ramped down combat operations in Iraq, and they're saying in a couple years we'll be out of Afghanistan. What happens if there's another terrorist attack, Toby?
Oh, that's it. I mean, that's...
What happens if they use terrorists from, say, a different country? What happens if they pick Libya this time? What happens if they pick Syria or Iran? That's all they have to do. Make us use terrorists, use individuals from a country that the U.S. already doesn't like, is already looking for a reason to invade. And there you go. Another war, another couple trillion, another few thousand American dead.
And if they're planning it outright, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so we'll see down the future. I mean, if they're planning it outright, they see, I don't know if Obama would go right in, but if they're planning it outright, they'd do it right before the next election season. Well, guess what? That's a winning ticket right there with this American people who will just jump in at any time and do whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, that's...
I mean, the American people, there's a terrorist attack. You can see by the footage I watched after this, that's what it is. The American people are ruled by emotion.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the way it is. I don't know if it's just the American people, but that seems like people in general.
It is. It's upsetting. But what are you going to do? I guess we'll continue talking about it week after week. Maybe we're getting through to a few people and challenging other people and really upsetting other people. You know what's amazing?
I don't really care anymore.
With the amount,
this
is how fringe we are, Nick. And the American, I mean,
I don't think it should be that fringe.
But this is it is though. You got to admit it is. When you look at what the main people are thinking about, this is fringe. And yet the people who are commenting on our videos and sending us stuff say we're statists because we support Ron Paul. And we're going on here saying stuff that 90% of the American people think that we're whack jobs because we're saying it, yet we're statists because we support Ron Paul.
Yeah,
so
we're kind of caught. You're in that position where the people on your side don't really seem to like you too much, and well, obviously the people who are not on your side don't like you too much.
Well, that's because their emotions have taken over this time.
Nobody likes us. I actually think that's a good thing because...
Let's challenge them, Nick. Hit me right here with your shoe.
Yeah, I was just... I mean,
let those emotions go.
If you're out there to make friends, you're not really going to challenge. Things need to be challenged.
You need to stir the pot. You need to get the debate going and stop just echoing this mantra that's out there of we are better than the rest of the world and our culture is the best culture and let's implant our values in all around.
That's kind of the mantra really just isn't to question it too much, I don't think.
And meanwhile, we lose our civil liberties, they get destroyed, and the freedoms that are supposedly make this country so great aren't really there. They're talked about a whole lot, but they're not really there. You want to look for them? Where?
At the airport. Go to the airport and look, that's where they went.
Look for your freedoms inside that box that takes a naked picture of you.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, we do
fill up your genitals.
Yeah. In other news, something that's still going on that was supposed to only be over months ago, I think, at this point, is our involvement, our funding of this stuff that's going on in Libya. I thought that was only going to be a couple days, Nick. I mean,
it was going to be days, not weeks, but apparently they can honor their pledge.
No, we're going on months now, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's... we're not on my camera.
Yeah, that's okay. Switch the camera when you get a chance.
Apparently, it's a NATO-led operation now, so we can say we're not in charge. But who's in charge of NATO? The U.S. is. So it's not an American-led mission. It's a NATO-led mission, even though we're still contributing a lot of the resources. There's some other countries involved, France, Italy, the U.K. They're certainly all involved, but the U.S. is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, especially when it comes to air capabilities. And apparently, it looks like they attempted to kill Colonel Gaddafi. Instead, they got his 29-year-old son, who probably was a bad guy. I'm pretty sure all the sons were in the Libyan military, so you could argue that his son was a legitimate military target. Unfortunately, they also killed 3 of Gaddafi's grandchildren, who I'm pretty sure are not of military or fighting age. So I don't think the children really did anything. You could maybe make a case
collateral damage,
was a legitimate target.
Collateral damage.
And they said, again, they're getting caught in another lie here. We've been lied to so many times about the Libyan situation that I'm not just not surprised. I'm not even all that pissed off, although I guess I should be. But originally they said that overthrowing Gaddafi wasn't the goal. Then they changed their mind and said, oh, no, we made that up. Now overthrowing Gaddafi is the goal, but we're not going to kill him. Why you would try to overthrow a dictator and not try to kill him, I don't know. Maybe you just enjoy having a war going on. Maybe you just want to bomb the crap out of a bunch of people who aren't the dictator, hoping that maybe just like blowing people up. If you blow up the dictator, there won't be as many other of his troops to blow up if they surrender. Now they're saying, yeah, our goal is to get rid of Gaddafi, and apparently they're trying to kill him. So they just keep changing their story, Toby.
Yeah, well, they do whatever they want, and the American people continue to buy right into it, I'm sure. They didn't even remember the news stories that came out the first few days. It doesn't even matter anymore because, like we said when this first started, the American people are behind this conflict. They're behind going in there and talking and continuing this. So I'm not too surprised, but we'll continue talking about it. It looks like we may be getting involved in, where is it, Syria next? I don't know.
There's some talk about Syria.
We'll see. Anyways, let's move right along. I do want to talk about this because with all this Osama talk, this whole news story kind of flew right under the radar of media, the media outlets out there, and I think it's something that's extremely important to talk about. And that's talking about medical marijuana and what the federal government is doing. Now, during the Bush administration, we ranted and raved about how he would send essentially troops, but stormtrooper, police officer type people to raid medical marijuana clinics, usually steal all their marijuana and their money. Sometimes they charge people with crimes, but they do this over and over and over again. It wasn't very effective in cutting down on the dispensaries with states that already had them, such as California, where they really did it a lot. But it did dissuade other states from passing such laws. New Hampshire, where we're broadcasting from, being one of those. As many, lots more. Well, when Obama became president, one of his platform pledges was that he'd stop the raids. And most of us thought that he meant that means states can decide what they want to do. The federal government will hands off the whole situation because he said he'd stop the raids, right? Well, yeah, to a certain extent. There are still some going on. This article that I'm reading from KOMO News, and I'll throw it up on our forum at freemindstv.com so people can read the whole thing. But it's talking about how there are still some raids going on in a few states. So he hasn't completely followed that promise even. But what he's doing, on the other hand, I consider much, much worse. And that is, he is having his attorney generals send letters to governors as well as other state officials warning them that they could possibly become in some legal trouble if they pass such marijuana laws, or if, say, they want to regulate medical marijuana, because it's illegal on the federal level. Several states have started reassessing their medical marijuana laws after stern warnings from the federal government that everyone from a licensed grower to regulators could be subjected to prosecution. The ominous-sounding letters from U.S. attorneys in recent weeks have directly injected the federal government's back into a debate that has been in years progressing towards the state level. But not anymore, because now it's back on the federal level because the Obama administration has essentially said, yes, we will not do as many of these high-profile raids that were unpopular with the people. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending threatening letters to governors and other state officials, other bureaucrats out there, warning them that they could possibly find themselves in jail if they support such legislation and sick people getting the medicine they deserve. That is about the dirtiest way they could go about doing this out there. Because it's not in the open, it's not even being reported on really, because of course there's this other smoke flare going off in the other corner. It's just what's going on. I mean, Washington, let's see, the Governor Gregory of Washington, it's the reason he cited as vetoing that state initiative to make medical marijuana legal in Washington state. But didn't do it because he got a threatening letter from the federal government.
It's also it's an absurd assault on federalism and representative government is what it is. I mean that's something on the order of what George III would have done. I mean historically, if there is a law where the federal government says that the federal law supersedes, you do not try to arrest a state legislature for passing a law or a governor for signing it into law. The way that the federal government would challenge this is to go to court and try to get it, and then they could get an injunction. But at the very least, you need to allow the states to pass laws like this, even if you think the feds have a constitutional authority to regulate drug cases, and I don't know where you think they get that power, if that's your belief. Even if you think they have the authority, you need to let the states pass the laws so they can be shot down in the courts and form a test case. You do not threaten to arrest members of state government for representing their constituents.
Yeah. Or the bureaucrats on the level who are, say, in Colorado or in California or in Montana or in Rhode Island, wherever there's over a dozen of them, wherever there is medical marijuana, those states, it's the bureaucrats who are handing out the licenses who could be subject to arrest and prosecution. The people who are hired by the states, the state government, to hand out licenses are being threatened with drug trafficking by the federal government, by your beloved Obama administration, you freaking liberal hippies out there who thought he would solve all your world's problems. This is insane.
And make it more war.
God. And yet
he's a real,
he's a real man for change.
And people in San Francisco must love it, right? I don't get it because, yeah, still continuing the drug war, hasn't brought back any civil liberties. I mean, I know you don't agree with us on the economic issues. So he's done a pretty good job of trying to socialize and completely destroy the U.S. economy, as I would expect a socialist to do. But most of you who are traditionally liberal, I think your heart's in the right place. You just don't understand economics very well. And typically I agree with you a little bit more on, say, civil liberties. But he's doing the exact opposite of what I thought most of you wanted done on war and civil liberties. Yeah. And yet I don't see the left-wing anti-war protesters out there. A few of you are. I don't see very many of you out there anymore. So apparently most of you weren't that principled. I don't get it. I don't get the appeal. And we've got a war on terrorism, a war on drugs. These are wars against ideas, and usually war powers are what oppressive governments use, emergency powers and war acts. They use them to curtail people's civil liberties. They don't even need a real war. They just declare war on a plant, and then apparently they circumvent the U.S. Constitution that way.
Wow. Well,
nice loophole. I didn't know it was in the Constitution. I didn't read that part, but
Nick, it's been a depressing week in politics.
Congress can declare war on a plant.
More than that, more than anything else, it's a depressing outlook on the opinions of the American people. Because man, oh man, are they swayed by propaganda and really whatever they're told. Anyways, we're out of time for this week. FreeMindsTV.com is where you can contact us, find ways to help us out, donate us some money if you like our ideas and want us to keep on
Some of you are all right.
Some of you like what we're saying and you're happy we're saying things. If you like that, maybe throw us a buck or two. FreeMindsTV.com. Until next week, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good one.
Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.